Iran doesn't want to move quickly. This is good for Iran. Iran is loving this. And they've been preparing for a war of attrition with us for 20 years. The enemy gets a say.
I don't think the Ayatollah would agree that this has been good for him. I mean,
I didn't say for the Ayatollah.
But the top layer of the regime would not agree that it's been good for him.
We've opened up sanctions.
S.E. Cupp just appeared on The Arena with Kasie Hunt on CNN, where she went head-to-head with pro-MAGA commentator Scott Jennings over what many are calling Donald Trump's deeply troubling war strategy in Iran. We're going to break down key moments from this intense panel featuring S.E. Cupp, Scott Jennings, and others during Kasie Hunt's show. And yeah, I'll also be giving you my take on everything that went down here. So let's dive into it together.
I'm just looking back at what we've gotten out of this so far, or what anyone's gotten out of this so far. The regime is unchanged. The Iranian people are not liberated. The nuclear materials
still
there. Strait of Hormuz still closed.
And it wasn't closed before, to be clear, before this started.
No, I mean now.
Yeah.
Closed.
Right. No, you're right.
Worse.
I mean, what have we gotten out of it? We have gotten a closed Strait of Hormuz.
We're in a worse spot. And obviously we're seeing the result of this economic pain and people very frustrated with, being misled, lied to during a campaign in which we were told Biden and Kamala were going to get us into a war with Iran and Trump wasn't. And people who just dealing with the economic frustration. I think at the very least, because suddenly everyone's a foreign policy expert, right? And some are going to say, we're winning this war, and Trump is saying it's terminated. There's no unilateral termination. Iran gets a say. But putting all of that aside, at the very least, I think it's very clear Trump, Hegseth have failed to sell this war to the American people. And that's what we're seeing in those poll numbers. And that's a big deal in an election year.
Yeah, well, let's dig into some of this polling for this side of the table, because as he astutely points out, I think it helps explain the disparities here. Okay, so the right decision, wrong decision in the Washington Post poll, 61% say that it was a mistake to take military action against Iran. 36% say that it was the right decision. Now, what does this split look a lot like? I don't think I have it to hand, but let me just tell you, it looks a lot like President Trump's approval rating, okay, his up or down. Now, compare this is Iran, Iraq, and Vietnam, okay? Obviously, in Iraq, the Bush administration did a ton of work, much, of course, later discredited, but at the time, they did a lot of work to convince the American public that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that getting rid of Saddam Hussein was a good idea, and they built up public opinion. They sent Colin Powell to the United Nations to work on that. Now, Vietnam, I'm going to date myself, but you all know that I was not around for the Vietnam War. My knowledge of how that was sold to the American public was quite different, but that also came in the context of a very long fight against communism in the wake of 2 world wars, the Korean War, and other places. But it's just worth noting that the polling that you are looking at in Iraq, okay, 2007, when these numbers look like what the Iran numbers look like now, 2007 was 4 years after we invaded. In Vietnam, 1970, well into the conflict. Scott Jennings, I mean, how big of a mistake was it for the president to do this without bringing the American public along with him?
Well, look, I noted in the other survey you put up that 41% said it was too soon to tell. And I suspect what they are waiting for is whether we meet the primary objective, which I do think the president's been pretty clear about. We can't let them have a nuclear weapon. And so if we exit this thing, whenever we exit this thing, and can tell the American people, yes, this stuff was buried under the rubble, we've got a plan to extract it, or it's not going anywhere, or however we explain that they're not going to be able to build a nuclear weapon, I suspect a good chunk of the people who say too soon to tell will say, okay, well, we exit it having met our objective. Now, the question is, how long is that going to take? And the truth is, we don't know the answer to that. I think the president would like it to happen right now. He obviously would love to make a deal right now. And I also think the president believes that the blockade, in which we're not actually dropping any bombs on them, we're just in the middle of a blockade right now, is actually more effective at hastening the end of this than the military campaign was. I hope that's true. I interviewed a former Rear Admiral this week, and he was like, yeah, a little patience on the blockade, and you may just get what you want, which is ultimately bringing the Iranian economy to its knees, bringing them to the table, getting China to force them to end this. And the way it can only end for him is they don't have or cannot build a nuclear weapon.
You really have to question how long they're going to keep putting Scott Jennings on these panels after that moment where he got completely shut down by Adam Ockler and ended up looking rattled on air. something the entire country watched unfold. And if you look at the reaction, a huge number of viewers are saying this guy comes off as overly defensive and probably shouldn't be getting this kind of platform anymore. On top of that, he's out there running defense for an administration that, right now, is dealing with serious public skepticism under Donald Trump. Let's be honest. There are major concerns about leadership, messaging, and the people surrounding Trump. And even Kasie Hunt pointed out that the support numbers for this war closely mirror Trump's own approval ratings. What that really tells you is that the only consistent backing is coming from the MAGA base, the same audience that continues to buy into narratives pushed by commentators like Scott Jennings. But as this situation drags on, that support doesn't stay stable. It starts slipping, especially as real-world impacts hit like rising gas prices. And notice, Jennings almost never addresses that. Whenever he's pressed on it, like Adam Mockler did in that now widely discussed segment, he dodges, laughs it off, or shifts focus, because deep down he knows it's a weak spot. And the longer this goes on, the less effective that kind of spin becomes. You've got Democrats pushing back, independents pushing back, and even parts of the MAGA base starting to question things as it begins to affect them personally. That pressure only builds, and it changes the conversation whether they like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you and others who have sat in the Republican seat on this show have made an excellent case for why it's important that Iran not have a nuclear weapon. It's that the president didn't do that in advance, right? Jamal, I mean, I want to bring this up because I think it's important to underscore, right? We talk about gas prices, right? You all drive by your local gas station, you know what it costs. But it's not just about the numbers. I mean, we do averages here. That's kind of the easy thing to pull. But the Washington Post asked Americans, how is this impacting you? What are you doing differently because these gas prices are higher? 44% said they had to cut back on driving. 42% are cutting back on household expenses. 34% are adjusting their travel and vacation plans. 15% are considering buying an EV, although that is potentially about to get way more expensive, by the way. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Don't do that.
But Jamal, I mean, we're heading into a midterm election, and this is how Americans are feeling.
They are. I think the president's problem fundamentally, obviously the war is bad, people don't want to be there, it's against his brand. He ran as an economic turnaround artist, and the economy hasn't turned around. Prices are even higher in some ways than they were a year ago. He is run against getting involved in Middle East wars, and now we're in the middle of a Middle East war, and people don't really understand why, and they don't know when it's going to be over. And then the president also ran on, dealing with immigration. What they did not expect was that a bunch of American citizens were going to get wrapped up in that, and a couple of them were going to get killed. This all is against what he ran for as president of the United States. And I think that House is starting to collapse in on him. Now, the question is, what can he do to turn this around, whether it's in the next 6 months or in the next 18 months for whoever's going to succeed him? I'm just not sure there's much he can do, because once people turn you off as president of the United States, ask George Bush, it's very hard to get them to click back in on you.
Agree?
Yeah, look, I think people like us can sit here and analyze the politics of this. I do think one thing about presidents is true. They make national security decisions with other things in mind other than tracking polls or, the media or a political push and pull. They make national security decisions based on information that only they have and based on the threats that they see that are imminent to the American people. That was his argument, that Iran was an imminent threat, that we didn't have time to wait, that this was the correct time to do it. Now, history will judge whether he was right or wrong about that, and history will judge how this ends, and history will judge whether he met his objectives. But in the moment, that's essentially what you hire a president to do, exercise their judgment to make national security decisions based on information that only they have, and that's what he's done here.
But history is really important. I'm glad you brought it up, because I hope that he's looking at history too, because history is there for all of us.
S.E. Cupp clearly understands this, but the reality is Donald Trump isn't exactly someone who's looking at history for guidance. And that's not really a surprise. It's pretty clear he doesn't operate from a place of historical awareness or deeper understanding.
To look at. And if you look at, say, 1980 and the war between Iran and Iraq, Iraq offered a ceasefire 8 days in. 8 days in, they offered a ceasefire. Iran said no. Iran would say no to ceasefire 6 more times, and that war would drag on for 8 years. Iran doesn't want to move quickly. This is good for Iran. Iran is loving this. And they've been preparing for a war of attrition with us for 20 years. So the president walking in and saying, it's terminated, we're done, we've won, they get a say. The enemy gets a say.
I don't think the Ayatollah would agree that this has been good for him. I mean,
I didn't say for the Ayatollah.
I mean, but the top layer of the regime would not agree that it's been.
We've
good
opened
for them.
up sanctions.
We've
If the
destroyed
point is
their
to
economy.
drive the economy to their knees,
currency.
we're opening up sanctions.
We've destroyed their economy, and their currency is now basically worthless. I think in my opinion, it's a stretch to say it's good for them.
And yet we can't get.
They're not running to get a deal.
Open.
They're
not running to get a
We're
deal.
blocking it. I mean, it's our strategy to keep it closed in order to bring them to the table. That is the current strategy. Now, you may disagree with that or think we should be having a different strategy, but the current strategy is no bombs, but a blockade to bring them to their knees to the point where they have to come to the table.
Look, I don't reflexively root for the president to lose on this because the president of the United States is the symbol of the American democracy. And so if the president fails, it means that we as a country have failed. The problem is here, the president's not doing what it takes to bring us together in order to accomplish the goal. He's not getting the American people around this goal. He's got some questions about the military strategy. Iran now controls, or is at least a partner in controlling a very strategic asset in the Middle East that they didn't have any say in before. So I think what we need is the president to try to bring Americans together, whether it's Democrats in Congress, it's people in the American public, to try to accomplish this goal. And right now, he's not doing any of those things. Instead, he looks like he's sort of moving all over the place. Iran is holding steady, and the president keeps changing his mind every couple of days.
All right. Well, we're going to continue to talk about this coming up.
So yeah, S.E. Cupp was absolutely on point with what she laid out there. The reality is Iran is benefiting from this situation, and the idea that Trump is suddenly going to start studying history or learning from past conflicts. That's just not happening. He's not even taking lessons from recent history. Wars like Iraq, Afghanistan, or even Vietnam, where things didn't exactly go according to plan. The truth is, Trump likely assumed this would play out more like a quick operation, something simple where they move in, take control, remove leadership, and wrap it up fast. But that's not how this works. Countries aren't interchangeable, and Iran is a completely different situation compared to somewhere like Venezuela. What we're seeing now is things not unfolding the way he expected at all. It feels like Trump and Pete Hegseth imagined this playing out like a movie. Clear heroes, clear villains, quick victory, and a clean ending where the other side just gives up. Like somehow it all ends with a dramatic surrender moment. That's not reality. That's a scripted fantasy. And the real world doesn't operate on that kind of logic. Anyway, I want to hear from you. Do you agree with S.E. Cupp's take that this situation is actually working in Iran's favor and could drag on much longer than expected? Or do you side more with Scott Jennings and the belief that Trump's strategy is solid and everything is going according to plan? Drop your thoughts on this segment from the Arena with Kasie Hunt. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe.